What if the most sensational stories, the ones that really grab you, aren't just about what they claim, but how they're told? How do you really know if something's credible, especially when you're dealing with deep government secrets? You are experiencing a unique two-voice AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into exactly that question. We're deconstructing a really compelling nonfiction book. Now, our mission isn't to judge its claims, as fact or fiction.
Right.
But really to analyze the powerful persuasive techniques woven right into its narrative.
And for more critical insights like this, insights that inspire reflection and rational thought, we invite you to explore Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel. We offer further AI book analyses there that really get beneath the surface of complex ideas.
Okay, so the book on our analytical table today is Annie Jacobsen's Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base.
It's a fascinating read, and let's be honest, pretty controversial too. Controversial is, maybe an understatement. And that's precisely why it makes for such a rich subject for this kind of analysis. We'll be doing about, say, 70% analysis and 30% summary of the book. And we're using what's called a rhetorical framework, basically looking at how an author chooses to communicate to get a certain effect across, not just what they say.
Okay.
Understanding this framework helps you, the listener, discern how an author influences you through their choices. It lets you evaluate how effective their message really is.
Right. So if we're going to understand how Jacobsen built this whole narrative, we kind of need to start with her. Who is Annie Jacobsen? How does her background maybe shape how we should approach this book?
Sure. Annie Jacobsen she's a highly accomplished investigative journalist. She's actually a Pulitzer Prize finalist, known for really in-depth research, especially on national security, covert ops, that sort of thing. Her reputation is built on, meticulous documentation and a willingness to tackle these really controversial subjects. That gives her a strong foundation of ethos. That's her credibility right out of the gate.
Okay, so she's got credentials. That definitely lends her some authority. But what about the timing? What was the world like, the cultural context, when Area 51 first hit the shelves?
That's a great question. The book came out in 2011, and it was a time when, public interest in government secrecy, whistleblowing, conspiracy theories, it was really high. Plus, it coincided with the declassification of a lot of Cold War documents. So that provided new material, new avenues for research. This specific moment, the occasion for the book, was definitely ripe for a deep look at Area 51.
And who was she writing for, would you say? Was it mainly people already interested, or was she trying to convince skeptics too?
Good point. She certainly targeted those already fascinated by military history, government secrecy, maybe even conspiracy theories. They're her primary audience, you could say. But her detailed, researched approach seems aimed at a secondary audience, too. Historians, academics, maybe even skeptics who were just curious about Cold War culture, technology, or wanted a more grounded take.
Okay, so with all that context, what was Jacobsen trying to achieve? What was her ultimate purpose with this book?
Her purpose seems twofold, really. To inform, definitely, but also to intrigue. She aimed to kind of demystify Area 51, blending these declassified facts with really compelling firsthand accounts she gathered. But at the same time, she wanted to challenge, maybe complicate, the prevailing myths, especially around, the Roswell UFO incident.
Right, Roswell always comes up.
Exactly. So the subject itself is that whole secret history of Area 51, its role in nuclear testing, aerospace innovation, Cold War spying, and also how it became this huge cultural symbol of secrecy and conspiracy.
And how did that mix of informing and intriguing come across in her writing style, her tone?
Her tone. It's assertive, definitely investigative, and at times quite sensational. She uses a journalistic style, trying to balance factual reporting with more dramatic storytelling, especially when she gets into the really controversial claims. It makes for a very engaging read, you have to admit.
It definitely does. So, okay, we've got the speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, tone. The basic situation. What about the exigence? What urgent problem or situation sparked this book, do you think?
Well, the book seems to be a direct response to really decades of speculation and just plain misinformation about Area 51. She uses these newly available sources to try and build a more complete, maybe more accurate narrative. That feels like the core exigence. Her medium is clearly nonfiction investigative journalism. She relies heavily on interviews, archival digging, and these narrative nonfiction techniques to piece the story together.
But writing about something so secret, That must have had huge challenges. What were the biggest constraints she was working on?
Oh, absolutely. Huge constraints. Heavy government secrecy, obviously. A necessary reliance on declassified documents, which, can be incomplete or redacted. And then there's the inherent challenge of verifying oral histories years later. People's memories fade, stories change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Those constraints definitely shaped what she could say, what she couldn't, and how she had to frame certain things.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the craft itself. How does Jacobsen actively work to build her credibility, her ethos in the book? And are there any places where that credibility might, wobble a bit?
She gets her ethos in several ways. Extensive interviews with former Area 51 people, scientists, military folks, her use of declassified documents, archival stuff, and of course her established background as a respected journalist adds weight. However, and this is really crucial for analyzing the book, her credibility does get challenged by critics. They often point to her reliance on anonymous sources for some of the most sensational claims, particularly near the end of the book.
Ah, the anonymous source issue.
Exactly. It creates this tension, right? How much weight do you give her reputation versus the lack of direct attributable evidence for these extraordinary claims? It's a key analytical point.
That's a really important point. Okay, so beyond building trust, how does she connect emotionally? How does she use pathos, emotional appeal?
Oh, she's quite skilled at evoking emotion. She describes the personal experiences of the workers, their pride, the intense secrecy they lived under, sometimes their fear. She uses really vivid imagery when talking about nuclear tests, covert missions, and, naturally, the alleged Roswell incident.
Yeah.
It taps right into that public fascination with government secrets, the unknown. It makes you feel invested in the human story behind it all.
And then there's the logic. What's fascinating here is, how does she structure her arguments? What's her logos like?
The book follows a pretty logical structure, chronologically and thematically. It starts with Area 51's origins and moves through its history. She presents evidence mainly through those firsthand accounts and the documents she found, trying to link technological progress with historical events. But, and this is a really interesting aspect of her logos, even a strong logical structure can kind of come apart if the author makes speculative leaps, especially in those final chapters about Roswell.
Right, you mentioned that before.
Yeah. The logic of her argument gets undermined sometimes by these jumps, and that's led to criticism about the book's overall logical consistency. It's almost a case study in how narrative pull, that desire for a dramatic ending, can sometimes weaken the logical foundation.
That's a big deal for nonfiction. What about her actual writing, the language and style?
Her writing is generally clear, direct, often quite dramatic too, which keeps you reading and conveys the seriousness of it all. She varies her sentence structure, sometimes short, punchy facts, other times longer, more descriptive sentences that really pull you in. And she uses rhetorical devices like metaphor and analogy pretty effectively, comparing complex, technical, or secretive things to stuff we can more easily grasp. It helps convey the sheer scale of the secrecy, the almost mythical nature of the place.
So the language pulls you in. How does she organize the whole thing to make it impactful? What are her main structural strategies?
Well, like I said, it's chronological and thematic. Origins, technology, cultural impact. She uses repetition effectively, coming back to key themes like secrecy, innovation, moral questions. And she's really good at juxtaposition and contrast, putting official government statements right next to deeply personal stories from insiders, or contrasting the mythic image of Area 51 with the mundane reality of some of the work done there. That creates tension, makes you think.
Are there any more advanced techniques she uses? Things that maybe stand out?
Definitely. She uses allusions quite a bit, referencing the Cold War Roswell Operation Paperclip. It weaves the Area 51 story into that bigger historical picture, giving it context. And there's irony, too, like pointing out the paradox of a supposedly non-existent base being world famous, or the contrast between amazing technological leaps and, well, what she sometimes suggests are ethical shortcuts or questionable decisions.
Okay, so pulling all this analysis together, what does it all mean? Did she achieve her goal? Did she, stick at the landing, despite some of these issues we've discussed?
I'd say she largely succeeds in her goal of demystifying Area 51, providing a really compelling narrative about its history. Her use of those exclusive interviews and declassified documents gives the book a definite authoritative feel. However, and it's a significant however, you really have to acknowledge the ongoing debate about the credibility of her most sensational claims, especially those towards the end.
Right.
So our overall assessment, based on this analysis, would be something like this. Through a mix of solid investigative journalism and gripping narrative storytelling, Annie Jacobsen's Area 51 effectively shines a light on this incredibly secretive military base. It engages readers with exclusive interviews, declassified docs. But her reliance on sensational, often uncorroborated claims in the conclusion does significantly detract, from her overall credibility and the logical strength of her argument.
That raises a really important question then. What common pitfalls did she manage to avoid, and where did she perhaps stumble, maybe in that pursuit of a really dramatic story?
Well, she definitely avoids just summarizing what was already known. She really digs into how secrecy and the drive for technology shaped the base, and even the American mindset around it. So that's a strength. Where she might have stumbled, and this gets into tricky territory around journalistic ethics and storytelling, is that in going for that big dramatic conclusion, she sometimes seems to prioritize narrative intrigue over strict evidentiary rigor.
Making it seem like device hunting.
Exactly. Risking that appearance that she was maybe looking for the most sensational details to build the story, rather than letting the verified evidence lead entirely. It's a fine line in narrative nonfiction. The book is sophisticated in how it explores themes like secrecy, progress, moral ambiguity. She does present multiple perspectives: government, scientists, the public. But, as critics point out, maybe she sometimes lacks that critical distance from her sources, especially when presenting those really explosive claims without stronger backup.
Understanding this kind of rhetorical analysis like we've done today, it has value way beyond just this one book, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Applying these tools helps you, the listener, navigate the massive amount of information you encounter every single day. It makes you a more critical, more discerning reader and thinker.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, these tools are essential for navigating the sheer info overload we all face. And for more deep dives into critical thinking and rational thought, remember to check out Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel. We offer more AI book analyses there. And you can find more of our podcasts, too, covering a whole range of intellectually stimulating topics.
We really encourage you to subscribe to our channel, share this analysis with others who might find it interesting, and maybe consider picking up Area 51 yourself to engage with it directly. We'll put a link in the description.
And as you engage with any book, any article, any piece of information, maybe consider this. What's the real cost when narrative intrigue seems to outweigh solid evidence? And how do you decide what to believe in this world full of complex and, sometimes really controversial information?